Hi, I'm Gary, and welcome to the galley. And in the galley today, we're getting ready for that great Irish American tradition of corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. I love corned beef and cabbage all year long, but this time of year, it's super easy to find. So I picked one up for us so I can show you how I do mine in the crock pot. And why I like the crock pot is because I can just go off and spend my day doing whatever I want to do and not have to babysit something on the stove. So it's super easy, super tasty and delicious. So let's do it. Let's make some corned beef and cabbage today. So in selecting your corned beef, I always select the flat cut. Now you're going to see it's going to say flat cut or point cut. So this is important. Don't just grab one. You see what price that you want. But look, because I think the flat cut is better, it's going to be much leaner. On the whole brisket, that point has a lot more fat on it. It also has something called a decal on it, which is more fat. The fat, the flat cut, that decal has been removed, so there's less fat and it lays flat. Now, I chose just under a 3 pound brisket. I was looking for about 3 pounds. It's just Billy and I'd like to have dinner and then have some leftovers. So think about how many people you want to feed with this corned beef brisket. And I would say you probably want to average a half a pound per person. So we'll have corned beef for dinner, and then we'll have corned beef for leftovers, and then maybe corned beef to turn into something exciting. So look for the flat cut. I think that's the best. What you need for your corned beef is obviously your corned beef. I do not rinse mine because that brine has all that like salty flavor in it. I don't want to rinse that off. And I know you'll see people say, rinse it, don't rinse it. I think you have to go with what you feel comfortable with. I personally don't like to rinse mine off. Obviously, it's corned beef and cabbage, and you need cabbage. And I always peel these outer layers off because I feel like they've been rolling around in the back of trucks and who knows what. So I just like to get rid of those outer ones. Obviously, we want carrots and potatoes. You can do corned beef and cabbage with just cabbage. I like to do carrots and potatoes too, and then I'll add onion and garlic just for flavor in that broth. And I picked some potatoes that are on the smaller side, and then if they were bigger, I would cut them in half. But I think with the size that they are, I'm going to leave them just like that. The onion I want to use to help flavor that broth, and the garlic I'm going to go ahead and smash. So while we're talking, we can start releasing that Allison in the garlic, and we'll just smash that to start releasing that. I also like for mine to do beef broth. So I made some beef broth yesterday. So we have beef, excuse me, you have beef broth. I'm going to actually add some mustard to my broth as well. And the corned beef comes with these little seasoning packets, which I think are fine to use. This is not a seasoning packet that's just filled with salt. This is actually pickling spices. And then I'm going to add my own. I have my own because I like to do a lot of pickling. If you don't have to go out and buy these. If you don't pickle, you can absolutely just use this. But I'm going to add some yellow mustard seeds, some dill seeds, and some celery seeds. So I like to put a little bit of my stock in first. And that way I can make sure that it's all mixed up when I add mustard and the seasoning. And you don't have to get technical. Just dump some mustard in there. I'm using whole grain. I'm wanting to, again, we're not worried about how much, but I would say if you want to count and you're adding extra spices, I would say a teaspoon of each one that you use. And this is really a place where you want those whole seeds and not ground up. So I'm going to add these. I'm going to add that seasoning packet, and then I'm going to make sure this is mixed really well, and then we'll start adding our vegetables. Now this seasoning packet does have crushed up bay leaves, but I'm going to add just another bay leaf or two to my stock here. This was something I forgot to mention earlier. Oh, these are just, some of these are in little pieces. We'll just throw those in there. And want to make sure that this is nice and mixed up. Another nice thing that you can put in here is beer. Beer is a great addition to this as well. But for me, this broth is what's going to season all of our vegetables and help season our corned beef. So I like to make it very flavorful. So now we can start to layer. And the onions, I'm just going to lay in the bottom here. And really, the onions we're kind of putting in here. You can certainly eat them, but for flavor more than to eat, I kind of discard them. And the same with the garlic. Now we did smash that garlic to release all that allicin that's good for us. And we're going to pop that in there. And next, for my next layer, I want to do my little red potatoes. Now, for potatoes, I don't recommend the russet baking potato because they're really going to fall apart on you. I recommend something waxy. So the red wax potato or even a yellow waxy potato, or even you can do a Yukon Gold. Yukon Gold are kind of in the middle between the waxy and the starchy potato. And we're going to put all of our vegetables in here. And on top of that, there she is. We're going to put our corned beef. And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to do my corned beef fat side up. And then I'm going to add my stock. Just till it gets to about the top of my corned beef. And at this point, you have a decision to make, and that is how long you would like to cook your corned beef for. I'm going to do this so we can have it for dinner, and it's already 11 o'clock. And are you excited for corned beef and cabbage for dinner, darling?
Are you cooking it?
Yes.
Then I am excited. What can I say?
There you have it. So I'm going to go for the shorter time. So I'm going to do it on high for 4 to 5 hours, depending on the size. If I want to do it on low, it's going to take 10 to 12 hours. I'm going to cook this for 3 hours, and then we'll come back and we'll add our cabbage. But for now, in the crock pot on high, and then I'll see you in 3 hours when we come and check on her and add the cabbage. So we are about 3.5 hours in. I actually went a little over, but we're looking nice here. And I'm going to take these onions out because I think we've gotten the flavor in our broth from these onions, and I want to make room for the cabbage. So I'm just going to go ahead and pluck these onions out. Smells divine. And while this was cooking, I made some brown bread, Guinness brown bread, to go with it. So I've removed my onions, and I'm going to remove some of this broth so that I can pour it over the cabbage. Now, corned beef and cabbage is not a traditional from the motherland dish. But when Irish immigrants first immigrated, they honestly could have beef for the first time because at that time beef was expensive in Ireland, and a lot of beef weren't slaughtered. They were saved just for their milk. So when they immigrated to the United States, and they lived pretty much in slums, and they lived next to Jewish communities, and in the Jewish communities they were making corned beef and had beef. So for the first time in history, these Irish people could have beef. And of the affordable beefs, the brisket was the most affordable. And at that time, it was salted and cured with salt that looked and was the shape of corn. In fact, it was called corned, that salt. So that's how it got its name, from the salt that it was cured with. And Irish Americans started celebrating St. Patrick's Day as a way to honor their homeland. And this corned beef and cabbage came out of their beginnings here in America. So today we still celebrate St. Patrick's Day to honor American Irish people. And the corned beef and cabbage is one of the main dishes that we use to celebrate that with. So next up, we're going to add our cabbage to this. I know you say, Gary, if you just stop talking, we could put the cabbage in there. So for my cabbage, I'm going to cut it in half. Cut it in half again. And this is an easy way to remove that core. And just cut that core off. When I was a kid, my dad would have a garden and he would grow cabbage, and we would put it up, and you had one of those hand choppers. We'd get a blister on our hand chopping the cabbage. But the adults would take the cores and put salt and pepper on them and eat them. I haven't ever tried that, although I'm sure it'd be good. Now, I like to have a bit of size to my cabbage, so I'm going to cut it in pretty big hunks, and then those hunks we're going to lay all across the top of here. That was just a little too big. I think there's still some core in there. And it's okay if it goes over top of your corned beef. Don't you worry about that. Cabbage is so good for you. Now, this is only for Billy and I, so this is a lot of cabbage. But I'm going to do one more piece on the top of there and save the rest of this cabbage for something. And now that my cabbage is on top, I'm going to dot it with some butter. I'm going to put the lid on, and we're going to go one more hour. And again, this is on high. If you did the 10 to 12 hour, it's much different. You don't put the vegetables in at the beginning. You wouldn't put the vegetables in until 4 hours in, and then this you would do 2 hours. And because we saved some of this, if you need it, you can pour it on top of your cabbage. And you can see if I hadn't taken that out, it probably would have exploded on me. All right, we're going back to the crock pot, and we'll see you in an hour. And while this is finishing, take the time, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up. Well, it's about 5 hours since we first started, and the time has come to unveil this beautiful dish. And I'm going to remove the vegetables and the corned beef and put those in separate containers. With the corned beef, I want to put on my cutting board to slice it. And let me just show you just how tender these potatoes are. Oh, they're going to be so good. And you can see how they've darkened where they've soaked up all of that beautiful liquid. Yummy. Okay. Now for the star of the show, this beautiful corned beef. I'm going to let that drain. Now with any piece of meat that's just been cooking, you just want to give it 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just let it rest before you start slicing into it. I'm going to move. I can pick that up out of the way. When you look at your corned beef and you see those lines, and that's how the grain goes. And what you want to do is slice against that grain. So what we'll start to do is we'll cut up here on the tip and come down this way. I think you look at this and you want to start cutting like this, but we want to go against that grain. So we're going to cut kind of coming down that way. So always look, take note of where that is. Now I just want to cut a few slices so that we can taste it. I don't want to cut the whole thing now because it will dry out. I would prefer to cut it as we're going to eat it than just cut it all up and just expose it to all that air. So I just want to cut a few pieces for us to taste, or I guess I should say me to taste. And it's so beautiful, so tender. Butter is so delicious. I love corned beef. Oh, there's my mustard. I like a little mustard with mine too. So I think mustard is a great thing to serve alongside your corned beef and cabbage. I'll taste that with a little mustard. Oh, this is so good. We're going to be happy, happy diners tonight. Try one of those beautiful potatoes. So tasty. Might sprinkle a little salt on them, but other than that, so tender, so flavorful, so good. Try some of this cabbage. Cabbage is so good for you, so good for your gut. The way I like to do that cabbage like that, just adding it that last hour, is it doesn't get overcooked. I don't really want my cabbage to be just all cooked out. I still want it to have just a little bit of texture to it. So that's perfect. And of course, carrot. I love carrots. Perfect. Not overcooked, just perfect. Now you absolutely can overcook your corned beef. If you cook it too long and you overcook it, it's just going to kind of shred and fall apart on you and not be able to slice it. I'm going to keep tasting our corned beef and cabbage because it's so delicious. Thank you for being with me today. I did make some Guinness brown bread, which I'm going to put some butter on to serve with our corned beef and cabbage for dinner. That recipe is coming soon for the Guinness brown bread recipe. So delicious, so perfect with your corned beef and cabbage. Hope everybody has a great St. Patrick's Day. Hope you make some corned beef, and I hope you subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you subscribe. And until next time, safe cruising.